Welcome to the weekend, and thanks for joining us on MS Now. Let me say that again. Thanks for joining us on MS Now. I'm Jonathan Capehart, along with Jackie Alemany and Eugene Daniels. Don't adjust your settings. We are formerly MSNBC. As of this moment, we have a new name, MS Now, which stands for My Source for News, Opinion, and the World. But other than that, and these snazzy new graphics, not much is changing. Bottom line, same mission, new name. And with that, let's get right to our top story. President Donald Trump is throwing everything he can at the White House walls, figuratively, of course, to try to get something to stick in his ongoing attempt to deflect from the Jeffrey Epstein saga, especially following the newly released trove of emails from the notorious child sex trafficker that includes a number of references to Trump and suggests Trump knew more about Epstein's abhorrent actions with underage girls. And after avoiding reporters' questions for the last few days, Trump finally responded last night on Air Force One.
What did Jeffrey Epstein mean in his emails when he said you knew about the girls?
I know nothing about that. They would have announced that a long time ago. Jeffrey Epstein and I had a very bad relationship for many years. But he also saw a strike because I was president. So he dictated a couple of memos to himself. Give me a break.
Trump then went on to push his latest deflection tactic, claiming that any investigation into Epstein's relationships should be focused on Democrats. It follows Trump's Friday morning social media post where he directed his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to investigate Epstein's relationship with prominent figures not named Trump. Folks like former President Bill Clinton, Clinton's former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, and LinkedIn co-founder and Democratic donor Reid Hoffman, among others. He added in an earlier social media post, quote, "Don't waste your time with Trump. I have a country to run." Let's not forget, Trump has long claimed the Epstein scandal to be a, quote, Democrat hoax. But now he's ordering an investigation into that so-called hoax. And Attorney General Bondi is more than happy to do Trump's bidding, saying the Department of Justice will, quote, pursue this with urgency and integrity. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives is getting ready to finally hold a vote on a measure compelling the Justice Department to release all of its files on Epstein. MS Now has learned that the tentative plan is for a vote to happen on Tuesday. When asked why he and his administration has been pressuring some of the House Republicans who had signed the discharge petition, like Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, Trump had this to say.
We think it's bad to talk about it because it gets away from the subject of how well the Republicans are doing. And when you talk about the Epstein hoax, what happens is you're not talking about how well we've done. And that's the whole purpose behind them. They want to waste people's time, and some of the dumber Republicans like that.
Joining us now, Laura Barón Lopez, MS Now White House reporter, and Mary McCord, former Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the National Security Division, co-host of the Main Justice podcast, and an MS Now legal analyst. Laura, Mary, welcome back to the weekend. Mary, so we just had that quote there, the President of the United States saying that this is a waste, that they want to waste people's time. He's also said that this is a waste of time. Here's a letter that Epstein survivors sent to Congress yesterday, and I'm going to read from it. It says, several weeks ago, when a few brave survivors stood before you and recounted their harrowing stories, many of you were shaken to your core. We urge you, when you cast your vote, please do not forget the horror you felt that day. There is no middle ground here. There is no hiding behind party affiliation. The testimonies you heard are just a fraction of the unimaginable suffering endured by more than 1,000 victims alike. Just, to me, it just seems unconscionable that you would have the President of the United States saying to the reporters, saying to the country, but most importantly, saying to the survivors that looking into this and getting all the information out possible is a waste of time.
I think that point is so important because, you know, whether these files are used by one side or the other as sort of a political fodder, a political football, what's important here is that the victims want these files released, right? Because early on in this, I was worried that maybe they would not, right? That some of them wouldn't want these very, very personal details about
the trauma.
Exactly, because having prosecuted sex offenses in my past life, you know, I know how traumatizing, lifelong traumatizing that can be. But these are the victims coming forward and the survivors and saying, we want this full accountability. So their voices resonate with me louder than any others. And to the direction to the Department of Justice, you know, we have now seen there's not even a facade of even-handedness now in the way this president tells his attorney general what to do and how she responds. And I do want to remind people, and I don't want to get ahead of where you all are, but I looked back to July and what the attorney general said about these files, because when it comes to Donald Trump now directing an investigation, she said, quote, "We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties." Well, we've come full circle from that, haven't we? If now she thinks they're immediately something worth to investigate.
And that's exactly right. And I think the thing that's really interesting here, and Laura, in this White House, where they're having this conversation and they are feel under siege. I've talked to a couple folks. The thing that they know, and when you talk to voters, and the reason this isn't going anywhere, other than the survivors standing out there and putting their necks on the line, is that voters may not understand the ins and outs of every policy, prescription. What they understand is broken promises, right? They understand what corruption kind of feels and looks like, right? And so when you have a president that comes in office saying he's going to release all the files, when you have him running for 4 years in the Biden administration saying that something was there, then you have the now FBI director, the deputy FBI director, and the woman who is running who is the AG of this country saying that there was something here and they had to release it. They kind of got everyone on the right excited that something was going to be here. They just thought it was going to be our Republicans. How are they handling this in the White House?
I mean, well, they've done a complete 180, as you just laid out. Look, the White House officials told us this week that essentially they know that it's a losing battle when it comes to the vote next week, that they expect it to potentially, to pass the House. Now, what happens in the Senate is we aren't totally sure yet right now, but whether or not it's even going to get a vote. That being said, I think there's a split between how aides view it and how the president views it, because aides view it as a losing battle. But the president throughout the week clearly felt like he wanted to be out there and to hammer Republicans on it and to try to pressure them. Now, he did that through his True Social posts. He did that by bringing Lauren Boebert to the Situation Room, which you cannot bring phones into, and to try to get her to take her name off of the discharge petition. So he did engage in a very last-minute effort to try to change where this vote was headed. That being said, I was talking to a House Republican this week who said, look, I think that the White House at least understands, and those around the president, that this is inevitable, that this is headed in a certain direction, and transparency is the only recourse now. But the president is clearly does not want these released. Despite what he said in the clip that you played, Jonathan, the president's actions don't match up with what he said, right? Because he is continuing to try to block the release of this, to try to deflect and distract in another direction by saying, oh, now let's investigate potential other relationships. So his actions don't match what he was saying to reporters.
To Democrats, they will say, yeah, investigate the Democrats too. Anyone who had anything to do.
Reid Hoffman said go ahead.
Yes, like anyone that had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein or raping these who were then little girls, investigate them.
And Mary, you talk about dropping the facade. I mean, Pam Bondi was a part of this political pressure campaign in the Situation Room to try to convince Lauren Boebert to take her name off that discharge petition. But there's another character that's also dropped the political facade here, which is Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General. He's the one who flew out to Colorado to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell after the fact, after their transcribed interview. She was moved to a lower security prison. He also claims that the White House and the Justice Department did not have any of these materials that were released this week. He responded in a post. When I interviewed Maxwell, law enforcement didn't have the materials Epstein's estate hid for years and only just provided to Congress. Is this incompetence or obfuscation from the DOJ?
Well, I can't disprove or prove whether he had those particular files, the particular texts and emails that we've all been reading this week. But we know they have many, many, many tens of thousands of pages of documents. And I'm sure that those 3 emails we saw this week are sort of not the only thing that could have been useful. When he interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell, he had a purpose in doing it. And it wasn't to ferret out the truth. And it wasn't to confront her with any of these types of texts or emails. And, on the dropping the facade point, I mean, what we know about the relationship between the president and this Department of Justice is that, whether you get investigated or prosecuted or whether you get pardoned or have your sentence commuted depends on whether you are a friend or a foe, whether you can be useful.
And on that point, President Trump was asked face to face about whether he was considering a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell. Watch this, y'all.
Have you ruled out a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell?
I haven't even thought about it. I mean, I haven't thought about it for months. Maybe I haven't thought about it at all. You're just asking me a
Why can't
question.
you rule it
But I
out?
don't talk about that. I don't rule it in or out. I don't even think about it.
My favorite part of this insane interaction, I haven't even thought about it. I mean, I haven't thought about it for months. Maybe I haven't thought about it at all.
It's like a poem.
Right, haiku. Laura, he's thinking about it. How could he not? Especially when Leavitt, the White House press secretary, last week said he's not thinking about it at this time or some word phrase.
Right, he's not closing the door on pardoning her, which when you say that in a full sentence, the President of the United States is potentially open to pardoning a convicted sex trafficker. And the easy answer you would think would be no. But under his administration, let's also play out what you were just talking about, which is that his personal attorney met with Ghislaine Maxwell, and then about a week later, she was moved to a low-security prison. And so the question that I hope, if I'm not able to ask the president, others in the White House press corps are able to ask, which is, you're the president of the United States. He's clearly directing the attorney general to launch investigations. Why not ask the director of the Bureau of Prisons to send Ghislaine Maxwell back to the high-security prison?
Right.
Because they have not answered any question like that. And no one so far has appeared in any of the reporting that we've done or others has disclosed who exactly signed off on that transfer.
Right.
Mary, I want to go to this email that really was one of the first ones that folks saw this week, that Democrats released and then Republicans released the rest of them. This is an Epstein email from 2011 between him and Maxwell, where Epstein says, quote, "That dog that hasn't barked is Trump." And then in brackets there, victim spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Maxwell to Epstein, I have been thinking about that, right? And the thing that, we hear from the White House is Donald Trump and Epstein were nowhere near each other for a very long time. And, Trump thought he was a creep, according to Carolyn Leavitt, the White House press secretary. This changes that, right? It's very clear that they were talking, at least, according to Epstein, talking in 2011. What does it say when we're seeing these releases in the courts? Like, if there is some kind of investigation, right, whether Trump says it or Democrats get power and then they do an investigation, right? These emails that are out right now are making clear that the timeline that the president and the White House set out was never true.
Yeah. I mean, these also just show that there is more there in terms of the relationship between not just Epstein and Trump, but Trump's knowledge of what Epstein was doing. And I think that's what's really critical here. And, it doesn't mean, I spoke with others the other night in a studio like this about, is there a crime there? I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
But, there's certainly a moral obligation if you are aware of what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, aware of the girls that he was trafficking in, they're underage. There's certainly a moral obligation. And how much Trump might have actually aided and abetted that or not at all, just turned a blind eye. We don't know that. But that is why people are clamoring for these documents. And I want to just say one more thing about this directing his attorney general to open an investigation. if Jay Clayton does open that investigation, and she said that he would, and he's going to do it urgently, notwithstanding 4 months ago her saying there's no third parties to investigate, that could have the effect of them saying we can't disclose these documents pursuant to a congressional subpoena because we have an open criminal investigation.
Yeah.
So this whole thing, to my
tactic.
mind, is a tactic to prevent the release of those documents.
Mary with the mic drop this morning. Thank you, Mary, for coming on, Mary McCord. Laura is staying with us.
Michael Cohen joins me now, of course, former Trump lawyer and now host of the political Substack channel at The Real Michael Cohen. Welcome back to the show, Michael. I'm glad to have you here. First question, did you meet or know Epstein? And I'm curious why you think he was invoking you in some emails and the plausibility that this report he tried to feed comments and questions to a member of Congress when you were appearing for questioning, like literally in real time.
Yeah, good to see you, Alex. Ain't that something, right? Let me be clear about something. I've never met Jeffrey Epstein. I've never spoken to Jeffrey Epstein. I've never emailed or texted or had any dealings with Jeffrey Epstein at all. In fact, I've been very clear to say that while I was employed at the Trump Organization for more than a decade, I've never even heard him speaking with Trump. I never met him in the office. Zero. So now we get to the member of Congress during my House Oversight Committee. That was the public hearing. Remember, I testified 7 times before Congress. So that's the House Oversight hearing, the one that was public. Why Jeffrey Epstein was texting with this member of Congress, to be honest with you, I have no idea. The part that bothers me the most about it is not so much the questions or the comments that Jeffrey Epstein was making to this member of Congress, but why this member of Congress was even in discussion with somebody who was a known child sex trafficker, who was known to have had inappropriate sexual relations with underage girls, with children. Why? And this member of Congress is a woman on top of everything. I mean, I can't put my finger on why this member of Congress would be engaging in any conversation other than what we now know, that Jeffrey Epstein was a financial supporter.
I got to say, that is a fair observation and one that actually crossed my mind as well as I was reading this rather stunning Washington Post article. So Epstein made several unflattering remarks about Trump via email, and he even said he could, quote, take him down. Michael, what is your sense of the value of what you've seen in the emails so far? Does it tell you anything about the relationship between them after Trump got into office in 2017?
So the answer to that is no. I've looked at the emails, and while I've engaged in obviously cross conversation with people who are more aligned in my thoughts, these emails do not provide a criminal act. Yes, it acknowledged the fact that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein had a relationship, but that's not new information, and it shouldn't be new information to anyone. I wrote a Substack, which I called, the guilty always yell loudest. And one of the things that I keep yelling is release the entire file, unredacted except for the names of the victims, unless they don't care. And there's a reason why. There's a reason that none of us know the answer yet. If they would release the file, we would all know why. All these conspiracy theories, all of these innuendos that are out there, whether Trump was this or Trump was that, or he engaged in this or he engaged in that, none of that would be out there anymore. We would actually know the answer, because it's important that the entire Epstein network be fully exposed. And when I mean fully exposed, I'm talking about everyone. Blue, red, billionaire, broke, famous, forgotten. It doesn't matter. Shine the flashlight on everyone from one corner of the square to the other.
Michael, is it conceivable to you, given how well you know Donald Trump, his personality, that he does not want to entertain any further humiliation or embarrassment by association with this absolute creep? Do you think it is something that he's like, I think I can control this. I know how to be the boss. I'm the boss of my company. I'm now the boss of the country, if you want to speculate that he might think that way. And so I'm just going to stick to my guns, not release anything and hope it goes away. Is that in his mental orbit?
Sure. I mean, it is absolutely 100% clear he does not want this file released. For almost a decade now, he has been talking, as have MAGA, about the transparency, about the release of the Epstein file, simply because they played it that this was a Democratic cabal of child sex traffickers. Unfortunately, it turns out that, well, that's not necessarily true. While there might be Democrats involved, we don't know the answer. Clearly, others are involved as well, and Trump does not want those names to be released. Well, sorry, because we now have a 218th vote on the petition, the discharge petition. That vote goes on Tuesday before the House. I want people to understand, it's not like once that petition is made into a vote and it passes means that we get to see the files the next day. That's not what happens. It then goes to the Senate, and then after the Senate, hopefully they approve it as well. Then it goes to the president for signature or veto. And I think we all have to acknowledge that he will most probably veto it, considering he could simply snap his fingers today, call up Pam Bondi or Kash Patel and tell them to release the files unredacted except for the names of the victims right now. And it wouldn't be 23,000 documents. It would be the entire kit and caboodle.
Very quickly, before I move on to another question, do you think it is conceivable, if you're right, and let's say he's done nothing personally wrong, nothing worth criminal prosecution, and that has been, nothing like that has been alleged at this point, and he's just protecting powerful people, friends of his. When did that start happening? Since when does Donald Trump show a loyal bone in his body to anybody? Why would he do that for these people potentially?
Well, he certainly didn't do it for me. And I don't know Donald to put himself at risk, whether it's politically or personally, for somebody else. I acknowledge what you're saying, that as of this moment, there is nothing in those emails that provides some sort of a criminal referral. In fact, to be fair, Virginia Giuffre, in her statements, in her testimony, claimed that Donald Trump was not sexually involved with her and that he was not part of this cesspool of individuals that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell brought to the table. But that brings up now the entire issue of Ghislaine Maxwell, because I, too, was in a satellite camp. And nobody ever turned around and gave me a dog. In fact, not only did they not give me a dog, they didn't even give me a pillow. Right? Nobody brought food to my cubicle. In fact, when they put me in solitary confinement, the first 3 days, they didn't even feed me. So I don't understand what it is about Ghislaine Maxwell, or what Todd Blanche clearly knows that she may or may not say, that is providing others with this desire to protect her in a way that no other federal prisoner has been protected before.
And look, it's more than just a comfy pillow, because a whistleblower has told Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee Ghislaine Maxwell is getting preferential treatment across the board in prison and plans to seek a commutation. And listen to what the president said last night.
Have you ruled out a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell?
I haven't even thought about it. I mean, I haven't thought about it for months. Maybe I haven't thought about it at all. You're just asking me a question. But I don't talk about that. I don't rule it in or out. I don't even think about it.
How do you interpret that?
Yeah, I interpreted that he has thought about it. Maybe he's not thinking about it at this exact moment, but I'm certain that people have brought it up to him, whether it's Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers or somebody else. Maybe when Todd Blanche came back from his one-on-one meeting with Ghislaine at the maximum security facility that she was in, maybe he came back with a private message to the president. Now, I could understand her wanting to get a pardon or a commutation. She has a 20-year sentence. Is 20 years enough? Well, not in my opinion for the crime that she committed. I think there are many, many more people out there who deserve commutations and pardons that should be in line well before Ghislaine Maxwell.
Attorney General Pam Bondi, as you know, has tapped the Southern District of New York to investigate Epstein ties to prominent Democrats after Trump called for it on social media. But here's what Trump said later. Listen to this.
I'm the chief law enforcement officer of the country. Not that I want to use that, but I am considered the chief law enforcement agent in the country, and I'm allowed to do it. I don't want to do it. I'm not doing it. I had nothing to do with that choice. As an example, that came from Pam Bondi from the DOJ.
Huh? I mean, Michael, what is the point of this after DOJ previously said there is no evidence to charge uncharged parties? I mean, is he not just attracting more attention to this issue?
Yeah, for sure. And look, the problem is really not even President Trump himself. The problem are the idiot enablers that are around him, that no matter what comes to his mind, no matter what he wants to say, nobody, like what I used to do, turn around and say to him, sir, you can't do that. All right. Here's a better way to do it. What you're going to do is going to bring you more grief, more trouble, more headache. But where I stand on the same side as President Trump, if there are Democratic big donors, if there are Republican big donors, if there's members of Congress, if there are businessmen, if there are billionaires, blue, red, independent, it doesn't make a difference. If they're billionaires or they're broke, if they're famous, if they're forgotten, like I said before, none of this should matter because the victims deserve justice and they deserve to see these pedophiles, these child rapists held accountable.
All right, Michael Cohen, my friend, thank you so much. And I should say we see on the background there your New York Times bestseller book, Revenge. We should have noted you're the author of that, too, but I guess we know that already. Okay, we'll see you again. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Earlier this year, the Supreme Court issued an alarming ruling allowing ICE agents in the Los Angeles area to question and detain people based on how they look, what language they speak, what work they do, or where they happen to be, which is interesting because the Constitution actually has a specific amendment that prohibits that sort of thing. Nobody in America, whether they were born here, are here visiting, here seeking asylum, or even here undocumented, should be racially profiled or detained without due process. Without due process. But even beyond that, a ruling like this opens the door to U.S. citizens being swept up in Trump's immigration crackdown, which is exactly what's happening. In his concurring opinion, Justice Brett Kavanaugh said citizens had nothing to worry about. Quote, if the officers learn that the individual they stopped is a U.S. citizen or otherwise lawfully in the United States, they promptly let the individual go, end quote. The court's three dissenting liberal justices, though, could read the tea leaves. They noted that countless Americans had already been, quote, grabbed, thrown to the ground, and handcuffed simply because of their looks, their accents, and the fact that they make a living by doing manual labor. Today, the court needlessly subjects countless more to these exact same indignities, end quote. And those dissenting justices were correct. As ProPublica reports, quote, Americans have been dragged, tackled, beaten, tased, and shot by immigration agents. They've had their necks kneeled on. They've been held outside in the rain while in their underwear. At least 3 citizens were pregnant when agents detained them. One of those women had already had the door of her home blown off while Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem watched. ProPublica found that more than 170 U.S. citizens have been held by immigration officers. Of those, nearly 20 were children. And despite Justice Kavanaugh's assertion, these citizens are not actually always being promptly let go. Take the story of the natural-born American citizen Leonardo Garcia Venegas. In May, Garcia Venegas was working at a construction site in Alabama when masked agents swept through. He said they started detaining everyone who looked Latino and left the non-Latino workers alone. Garcia Venegas began filming as officers grabbed him, too. And through a struggle, you can hear him tell the officers that he is a citizen and was willing to show them his papers. Watch this.
Okay. I'll show my papers now. I don't see anything. I see anything. Okay. Okay, I'll show my papers now. tough. I got ground.
I'm a citizen. I'll show you my papers now. Even after the officers inspected Garcia Venegas' real ID, which is issued only to U.S. citizens and legal documented residents and is specifically designed to not be counterfeited, he said the agents dismissed it as fake and he was restrained for more than an hour. Just 2 weeks later, it happened again to the very same American citizen. Federal agents entered another construction site where Garcia Venegas was working, cornered him, and ordered him to leave the property so that they could check his status. Once again, he produced his real ID and his Social Security card, but the agents once again refused to accept it. Ultimately, he was released. In a statement to NBC News, DHS said Venegas interfered with an arrest during a targeted worksite operation and said agents do not racially profile or target Americans. Agents do not racially profile or target Americans. A DHS spokesperson said, quote, "We don't arrest U.S. citizens for immigration enforcement." Why am I telling you the story of Leonardo Garcia Venegas? Because this is not an isolated incident. There are countless stories of U.S. citizens being detained and arrested and assaulted, videos of U.S. citizens pleading with officers to check their ID, begging them to believe them. And this is not a country that compels its citizens to walk around with their birth certificate or their Social Security or their green card. There's no law in America that requires you do so. Trump's immigration policy is creating a situation where black and brown people feel like they just have to accept that they might be stopped by immigration officers and that papers, which they are not legally required to carry on their person, may not be enough, even if they do carry and present them. There's a real danger to the normalization of this kind of behavior. Like the Chicago teen, also a U.S. citizen, tackled to the ground by a federal agent.
He's a citizen! He's a citizen!
Why are you running?
He's a citizen!
You heard that. The agent said, "Why are you running?" Running is also not a crime in America. Or this Chicago paralegal, also a U.S. citizen, pulled from her vehicle by agents on her way to work.
She's trying to go to work!
What the
Oh, what? Crazy. Y'all some crazy. Y'all got no heart, for real. No heart. No heart.
All of this is to say, if you think it can't come for you, it can. Joining me now is Jason Stanley, professor of philosophy at the University of Toronto, where he focuses on authoritarianism, democracy, and propaganda. He's the author of several books, including Erasing History, How Fascists Rewrite the Past to Control the Future. Jason, great to see you. I wanted to just lean in on this issue of citizens being targeted. Not because citizens should be treated better than anyone else, particularly in the face of such thuggery, but it's important for people to remember that you're not protected by virtue of the fact that you're a citizen, and this is important. You've sort of seen this happen before in history.
Oh, well, absolutely right. The targeting of non-citizens is only really a way to normalize the targeting of everybody. And I want to say something about the U.S. context that's important here. There's a book by Vashla Weaver and Amy Lehrman called Arresting Citizenship. And what they show in that book is that fear of law enforcement interaction makes people much less likely to participate in civic engagement. So if you instill fear in black and brown citizens that they will have this interaction with ICE, then they're much less likely to show up to voting polls, to participate as equal citizens in society. So we have to think about that as also part of this broad strategy we're seeing.
Right, because you may not like what's going on in the political world, but you're not interested in spending a few hours in the back of a police car or a night in jail for no particular reason. The discouragement itself, I think you've made this point. You don't have to do this to everybody. You just have to do it to enough people that everybody sees it.
That's absolutely right. And you said, Ali, you said, we're not a country where you have to bring your papers around. Well, guess what? We are now a country where you have to bring your papers around.
I wish that having the papers would solve the problem, but that's part of the problem, right? Like literally this whole Real ID thing that everybody's been struggling with for the last few years to get one because you can't travel if you don't have one. They're made so that an officer can look at it and know that it's not a counterfeit. They don't even take the evidence, never mind taking your word for the fact that you're a citizen.
Right. That's absolutely right, because ICE is lawless. ICE is lawless, and there does not seem to be any way of as it were, policing ICE's behavior. And that brings me to another point, which is that local police are really important here. And we learn about this from history as well. My grandmother talks about how on Kristallnacht in Germany, a local policeman helped a Jewish citizen escape from the SA. The local police are there to protect the local residents. If somebody's doing something illegal to a local resident, whoever it is, the local police, it's their responsibility to intervene. So now that we've got this kind of lawless organization essentially invading American cities, these questions from history are now going to become much more salient, these lessons from history.
We've seen the examples, by the way, in Chicago and in Portland of local police standing up to these federalized authorities. In fact, ICE is saying they're going into Charlotte, North Carolina now. And last night, one of the first things that happened is the police department put out a statement to say, here's all the things we don't do as police, and we're not going to assist in these things. We are not here for federal law enforcement. It's not our remit, and we're not going to engage in it. And we're going to make sure that our officers are not involved in it. We're edging toward a confrontation between armed people in some cases.
Well, to stave off authoritarianism, everyone just has to do their job. Police just have to protect their local residents. That's their patriotic duty. That's their job. Teachers just have to teach history. We've talked about this before, Ali. We have a system, a system of law. If everyone in this democracy does what they're supposed to do, teach history if you're a teacher, protect residents if you're a police, then we can get through, if you're police, then we can get through this. But we also are, let's face it, seeing extensions of patterns that we've already had. For instance, felon disenfranchisement was used to intimidate black voters in Florida recently from showing up, like arresting people saying, oh, you weren't legally allowed to vote. You didn't know that you had this felony ages ago. That was so we're seeing that that's a similar tactic, and it's being directed against black and brown citizens to prevent them from engaging civically, to create a kind of dual citizenship, first and second class tier of citizenship. So we have to be aware of that as we move forward here.
Online, you are known as @JackUno, which you are well known as amongst your fans and followers. The support and enthusiasm that you have garnered has even spawned lookalike contests in cities across the country. And now we're seeing high-profile politicians, people like Gavin Newsom, who are actually mimicking your style, your trolling for a cause model, your tone, and your memes and your trolling. You've obviously gained a lot of influence as a political outsider. Why run as an insider? Why run for Congress?
I'm running for office because 250 years after our country was founded, we're in a crisis, unlike we've seen before. It's a serious moment, and it's a crisis on almost every single level. It's a cost of living crisis driven by the president's big, beautiful bill, which is historic cuts to social programs that make life more affordable for working families. Healthcare, education, childcare, all been cut. It's a corruption crisis. The president has made nearly $1 billion so far this year while in office. He's picking winners and losers in every industry from the Oval Office. That's cronyism. It's not capitalism. And the worst part is, none of it has to be this way. There's good news, because we can do something about it. And Democrats have to win back the House in the 2026 midterm elections. History is watching this moment. And I'm running for office in my home, New York's 12th congressional district, where I was born and raised. I took the 79th Street bus to school every day as a kid from one side of this district to the other. And I care about this community. And they deserve a representative who will listen to them, who will understand their concerns, amplify their voice, and go to Washington and execute on their behalf.
What do you say to constituents, potential voters, who are more worried that you'll be more influencer than legislator?
Well, I'm not just, I think I'm the only content creator who has a law degree and a business degree from Harvard that I know of. So I've spent time in and around politics my whole life. I've worked on political campaigns. I've got a law degree and a business degree, and I've spent time studying policy, and so I really care about. And unlike a lot of influencers, my message is always political. It's a political action tool. And so I haven't cashed in, and I'm not doing this for any other reason than to speak out for the values of our party and what we stand for. And so as a citizen, my constituency was one, just myself. But as a congressperson, I would represent a district.
And I want to pivot and talk a little bit about the elephant in the country, which is your grandfather was obviously the president of the United States, and your family is one of the most storied political dynasties in American history. But Trump has been seemingly obsessed with dismantling your family's legacy. He's declassified previously classified Kennedy assassination records. He's paved over the Rose Garden, which your grandmother last renovated with her friend Bunny Mellon in 1961. He recently razed the Jacqueline Kennedy Garden with the demolition of the East Wing. He sought to MAGAfy the Kennedy Center, and he also even wants to repaint Air Force One so that it no longer has, as he's put it, a Jackie Kennedy color. What do you think Trump's trying to accomplish here, and does it make your decision to run for this seat that much more urgent?
My grandfather's legacy of service means a lot to me. He was the youngest person ever elected president. He sent a man to the moon. His White House drafted the Civil Rights Act, and I'm protective over that. And President Trump, and it's not just my family's legacy. It's generations of Americans and New Yorkers who fought and sacrificed to build this country. And he is dismantling that legacy. He's so obsessed with the Kennedys and the Kennedy name and the Kennedy brand that he caged one and put it in his cabinet, a rabid dog in his cabinet, put a collar on my cousin RFK Jr. and has him there barking, spreading lies and spreading misinformation.
You were the first member of your family to come out and criticize him publicly. What do you say to voters who now see the Kennedy name and associate it with your cousin's policies?
I don't think there's anything anyone can do to change what JFK, my grandparents, my mom, my Uncle John stood for. Nobody's that powerful. But RFK Jr. is a dangerous person who has making life and death decisions as Secretary of Health and Human Services. And you don't just have to take my word for it. Now we have an actual record to go on. He has cut a quarter of the people who work in his agency. He fired all the vaccine experts on the panel and replaced them with anti-vaxxers. He's cutting funding for life-saving research, cancer patients, giving them their last hope. People should know, I mean, when he's not making infomercials for Steak and Shake and Coca-Cola, he's spreading misinformation and lies that are leading to deaths around the country. Measles outbreak, there's a measles outbreak in America right now, higher than it's been in 40 years as a direct result of what he has done.
Do you think your cousin is profiting off of his position in the Trump administration?
This brings us back to the corruption crisis that we're in. I don't think it takes a genius to know that the Trump administration is the most corrupt in American history. And I don't know who's paying him, but I know that what he's saying isn't making anybody healthier or safer, and that the American people should know when he barks who's actually talking.
You are the first Jewish Kennedy. During a time of rising anti-Semitism, not just in this city, but across the country, what do you have to say to your constituents who are really worried? How are you going to keep them safe during this period of time?
Anti-Semitism is on the rise in America and around the world. And since October 7th, hate crimes against Jews have more than doubled. This is a serious situation. And this community has been, and New York City has been, for centuries, a safe haven for Jews. That's why my own relatives came here, and why they were able to succeed here. And Jewish people in this city and around the country feel scared. And we should also, there's actions that we can take. For example, the Nonprofit Security Grant Program at the federal level is a federal program that provides funds to safeguard our shuls, synagogues, temples, and also, by the way, mosques.
Right now in Washington, the Senate passed a bill to end the shutdown after a 40-day impasse. It reopens the government. There were a handful of Senate Democrats, not without criticism, who ultimately supported this deal. It's going to reverse some of the pain that Trump inflicted, but obviously there's been a lot of backlash so far. Are you opposed to Democrats making this deal, and do you think that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is up to the task to continue to lead this cohort of Democrats?
Well, President Trump is to blame for this shutdown. He's in control of all three branches of government, and the blame rests directly on him. And we just have to look at what he did during the shutdown. He had a Great Gatsby-themed party at Mar-a-Lago. He knocked down half of the White House to build a ballroom, and he went golfing. And the American people understand who's actually to blame. And the voters last week showed that they blame the Republican Party for this shutdown. And the message that I got from last week's election was that it's not the time to cave.
You're a lawyer, as you noted. Trump's retribution plan at the DOJ is one of the most dramatic things we've seen done to American institutions in modern history. How alarmed by you on this? And from a service perspective, if you were elected to be a member of Congress, what would you do to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again?
Well, this brings us to the constitutional crisis that we're in. The president is using not just the bully pulpit, but also the actual levers of power, his Department of Justice, to silence his critics, to exact revenge from universities, to punish law firms, and anyone who's willing to stand up against him. And there's a lot that we can do at the federal level. One thing we can do is elect candidates who know how to communicate and fight back in this toxic political environment that we find ourselves in. New media is completely polluted, and the air is dirty. But I have figured out a way to breathe in that environment, and we need to elect candidates who understand how to do that. And I think that's what would make me an effective representative. But beyond that, Democrats need to win back the House, because with control of the House, we have control of the Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee has the power to subpoena and to investigate. And that's the only way that we're going to get real answers to the questions of what the president is doing and do something to stop him from doing it in the future.
And I know you had mentioned a few things about oversight with regards to RFK Jr., but was there anything else you wanted to elaborate on in terms of the specific policies that he's already implemented that you would care to investigate if you became a member?
Well, we know that when he was campaigning for president and before that, he was spreading vaccine misinformation while he's being paid by anti-vax groups. And so one thing that I would want to do is tell my cousin, RFK Jr., when Democrats win the majority and when we control the Judiciary Committee, to come up to Capitol Hill and sit and answer questions.
We're almost out of time, but light question for you. Do you think Trump is a fascist?
I don't think that term is actually very helpful. I think Trump is Trump and MAGA is MAGA, and it's a completely new movement, and that they control a propaganda machine bigger than anything humanity has ever seen. He not only controls his own social media platform, which he uses to issue official White House communications, but he is in bed with the leaders of every other platform out there, Elon Musk, Zuckerberg. All of them are working together to spread to promote their own agenda. And so fascism, I think, is a catchy term, or it feels good to call somebody something so extreme, but I think this is completely new and an unprecedented threat, and we need to respond to it with new, creative ways of fighting back.
So you don't see any historical analogs here?
Well, of course there are. I mean, the same strongmen do the same thing over and over throughout history. But I think I think President Trump represents a threat unlike any other.
New today, a plea for justice, accountability, and truth from Epstein survivors ahead of the House vote next week to release the convicted sex offenders' case files. In a letter to members of Congress, they write, "As you gather with your family this season, remember that your primary duty is to your constituents. Look into the eyes of your children, your sisters, your mothers, and your aunts. Imagine if they had been preyed upon." Joining me now, one of the signatories to that letter, Lisa Phillips. She says Jeffrey Epstein sexually abused her when she was 21 while helping her modeling career. She is now a fierce women's rights advocate and host of the podcast From Now On, examining survival and recovery after sexual assault. I'm glad to talk with you again, Lisa. The first question is, why did you send that letter to lawmakers, and what do you expect will come from it?
Well, I think the main reason is because the hoax, the government shutdown, not swearing in people who support survivors is forcing more survivors to come forward. And as we rally together, we are getting stronger and we're gaining a greater understanding of what's really going on. Just the tip of the iceberg, but we're still learning more. And as we learn more, we want to keep fighting harder. So we're really putting that pressure on now.
Yeah. So you think the pressure will tip things in your favor to indeed have everything released? Do you expect that to happen?
No, we don't expect to have everything released. As you've seen, they're releasing a little by little, which is helping. We hope to have everything released, but we do believe it's going to take some time. But we are getting closer, as you can see.
Mm-hmm. And to that point, you make the distinction there that the House Oversight Committee has released more than 20,000 emails that the Epstein estate provided. It was done under subpoena. Much of the focus has been on the hundreds of references to President Trump, who denies knowing about the abuse. Has the information that you've been able to read and study about, has it revealed anything important? And if it's yes, how has it done that? And what do you want to happen next?
Well, 20,000 emails is quite a bit, but we've been going through them, and from what we've seen is pretty shocking. And a lot of the names that we have mentioned in the past few years are on them. And so there's quite a bit more information as you go through those emails and than what's released in the public. I do think the public and the media focuses a little bit too much on Trump, and where that is very necessary, there still is a lot to uncover in those emails that will come out shortly.
Lisa, are you feeling validated? You and the other survivors, obviously.
We actually are. We actually are feeling a lot more validated than we did standing on Capitol Hill a couple months ago. And we feel like we're making progress.
And you see now that the Department of Justice is now heeding Trump's demand to investigate Epstein's alleged ties to some prominent companies and Democrats, and that includes former President Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary, Reid Hoffman, also in terms of companies, J.P. Morgan Chase, with whom Epstein did business. Some say this is just retribution or diversion from the focus on his ties to Epstein. Is that how you see it?
No, I don't see it as retribution or diversion. I believe the focus away from him as well as on him is what we need to look at other people alongside with him.
Is there anything you can attribute, though, to Donald Trump's calling for this? I mean, he has yet to release all the files, right? He has not supported that. So can you surmise a reason for which he's, going after the Democrats and big companies?
Well, I would just think that he has knowledge that they also have enabled Epstein, or they also need to be held accountable. So I believe there's something to it.
Do you or any of your fellow survivors with whom you talk about these things, do you have any firsthand knowledge about Epstein's relationships with either Donald Trump or any of those that he has named for investigation?
From what I know from the survivors, that there are many others besides Trump that they focus on.
When you say many, can you give me a ballpark number? Has anyone suggested numbers or named names to you that I'm not asking you to name, but is it 5, is it 10, is it 20, is it 100?
There's quite a few, I would say over 20, but you just mentioned a few of them, and the FBI has actually the majority of the names.
So I'd like to ask you about Ghislaine Maxwell, who's serving 20 years for her role in Epstein's sex trafficking operation. House Democrats say that her new minimum security prison guards report she is getting concierge-style treatment and is working on a request for commutation from Donald Trump. She reportedly has a puppy. Look, Trump is reportedly not considering that right now. We heard him say that on board Air Force One. But what is your response to her rather cushy new level of incarceration?
Well, as a dog lover, puppies are emotional support. So I'm kind of furious that she has an animal to make her feel better and warm and cozy at night. It doesn't feel good for our survivors for her to have preferential treatment. I'm not surprised, as we know. This is how it normally goes. But I think in this case, as the only one being responsible at this time, it should be stricter for her.
How are survivors, you and those with whom you speak, how are you processing the politics right now around the Epstein files, around Donald Trump, around the powerful people that have been potentially involved years after Epstein died?
Well, we're still processing all of it. And after I spoke out on Capitol Hill, there was many more women that came forward that were actually able to connect more dots with pictures and dates. And so the more we survivors get together and feel empowered and we speak out, it allows others to see us and own their stories and say, you know what, I want to help out too. And so collectively together, we're finding out a lot more information that helps everything move forward.
And we are expecting another news conference on Capitol Hill this week. Are you going to be there, Lisa?
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll be watching for you. Thank you for your time with us on this Saturday. Appreciate that.